Welcome back, welcome back. When suicide bombers attacked London on July the 7th, 2005, Andy Hayman was the police chief in charge of the counter-terrorism operations. Just a year later, he was part of one of the largest surveillance operations ever, which foiled a plot to kill thousands of people by blowing up transatlantic planes. Could have been more deaths than even at 9/11. 3 of the plotters were convicted last month. But how many more Al-Qaeda-inspired attacks is the world facing today? And how has the terrorist threat changed? Andy Hayman's written a book, The Terrorist Hunters, and I spoke to him earlier. Andy, what was the key in terms of this airline plot that was so dangerous? Could have been bigger than 9/11 in terms of death toll?
I remember the situation like it was yesterday. A colleague came into my office. It was a normal day. I was sat at my desk. He came with a very long face, anxiety on his brow. And he said, I think we're facing a UK 9/11. And what we'd uncovered was a plot to bring down up to 7 transatlantic aircraft travelling from the United Kingdom to the United States. And just imagine Lockerbie, if it was over land, times 7. Or if you remember the Air France tragedy of recent times where it went off the radar and landing in the sea, and the complexity of trying to find the debris or the loss of life. It was unthinkable. Don't anyone go away from any other image than this was the UK 9/11.
And what was the key breakthrough, as it were, in terms of, I mean, you were finding 1 or finding 2, or the bugging of the... What was the breakthrough?
Well, I think this case, apart from it being so scary for us as UK citizens, and that was breaking through a threshold of what we'd experienced before, albeit we'd lost 52 people in 7/7 the year previous. What was also significant about this case was that we were deploying some of the most advanced surveillance techniques ever used. And we made a very operational decision at court that we would, unlike previously, we would be quite proud of that. We wouldn't share how we did it, but we would certainly be telling the wider public we did do that. So a combination of following people 24/7, to bugging their flats, watching them, listening to them. So we knew their every move. And when you think about it, the stakes were so high, to do anything else would have been irresponsible.
And at one point you heard on the bugging or whatever, the reference to 1819. What was that in fact a reference to? At first you were puzzled by it, obviously. What did it mean?
Yeah, we've never been quite sure, because there was 18 or 19 perpetrators that we arrested. So we weren't quite sure whether that was gang members, cell members, or whether in fact that was the number of routes or the number of planes. I don't think it was a number of planes. I think there was about half a dozen, 7 or 8. I believe they were either talking in code or referring to their other colleagues. And that was a very significant feature of this investigation, is that a lot of the transmissions by them on email to other parts outside the UK, most notably Pakistan, was coded. And also in their telephone conversations, emails, text messaging, that was all coded as well.
It's amazing about Pakistan, isn't it? I mean, at the moment, they couldn't be more forthright in what they're trying to do with the Taliban in South Waziristan. But there's also a lot of training that does go on in Pakistan, isn't there?
Yeah, it's very difficult, for us to, sit here and point the finger at any one country. But, I think when it comes to Pakistan, and you start looking at the evidences in front of us, which is factual, and the number of trips that are made from this country to Pakistan of would-be terrorists, and the amount of instruction that comes from Pakistan into this country, which directs and tasks terrorists who are in cells here, you can't help but conclude that Pakistan is a very, very key part of the jigsaw of the worldwide international threat that does come from AQ.
And AQ, Al-Qaeda, would you say at the moment we read that maybe some of the people who've been killed in Al-Qaeda have basically weakened their strength, that they are weaker now than they were at the time of 9/11? Wishful thinking maybe, but or is it true?
I mean, we'll never know for sure, but the indications are that the amount of activity doesn't seem to be there. But I think there's a difference between, has there been a dilution of their intent to attack? The answer to that is definitely not. But is their structure and their military way of planning been dented. I think that is the case, and there's two factors for that. It may be because of some of their key players have either been killed or put in prison. And the second thing is, I think a lot of the militants that they would be relying upon in their own country have now turned their focus more to unseating their government rather than actually being militant towards terrorism.
Right, so that's changed things. Overall, I mean, the alert is slightly down from the highest point, isn't it, at the moment? Does that indicate that the countries who are opposed to terrorism are winning at the moment? Or is winning too positive a summary?
It is too positive, Sir David. I wouldn't be going into that territory. I mean, let's be absolutely clear about what the threat is that we face. It's an international threat. It's not just one that's the American or UK. This is across the whole of the world, and we can see that from the number of attacks that actually happen. And any threat assessment that is put out or published publicly is only reliant on the amount of information or intelligence that you know about. And if you're in the dark over some of this intelligence, you could quite mistakenly be feeling quite comfortable. And a good example of that is just prior to the attacks here in July '05, known as 7/7, where 52 people lost their life. Only 2 weeks before that, the government here in the UK reduced the threat assessment, and most people could have thought they could have a sigh of relief. But of course that was only on what we knew at that time, and we didn't know, sadly, about the 7/7 and 21/7 bombers who came from left field.
Right. And what about the situation in terms of torture and civil liberties and all of that sort of thing, and the example that's always given of would you use torture on someone if you could save 100 lives and all of that? Where do you draw the line on civil liberties like that?
Well, I personally wouldn't even go anywhere near the debate of torture. I think, you know, that's just abhorrent. How do we know the information we're getting from someone who's under those circumstances is reliable and true? And I think it just doesn't sit neatly with me. Where it's a bit more controversial for some people when they hear my opinion on civil libertarian subjects is that of surveillance, stop and search, where I think that absolutely is a legitimate part of our armoury. And although some people might feel that that's, you know, quite a sort of radical thing to say, I think the alternative of not eavesdropping or bugging someone's house, car, whatever it might be, or stopping and searching someone because we think they may be a suspect, or indeed we just want to make sure that we're creating an environment where a terrorist travelling across our country won't feel safe, so he'll feel as if he should be thinking twice about travelling. I think the alternative of not doing that is actually we're creating an environment where terrorism can thrive, and I don't think that is acceptable.
And the other debate is also, of course, the debate to shoot to kill, obviously.
Yeah.
I mean, I've always been surprised that when Mr. Menezes was murdered in that way, that no one's really ever been tried for it, have they?
Yeah, that case will remain with so many people for so long, not least of which, of course, the family. But no police officer came to work that day to do that, to kill an innocent man. We ask our police officers doing that dreadfully difficult job every day to protect us. And what we don't want them to do is to blink when they think they're being confronted by a suicide attacker. And if they do blink, the ramifications could be dreadful. And actually, in their mindset, it is kill or be killed. So I think the strategy for stopping suicide attackers in a spontaneous, unfolding, fast-moving event is absolutely right. And what wasn't right on that day was all the way in which that was developed and managed by the police. That doesn't mean to say that the strategy to kill or be killed is wrong, and we should abandon it.
Well, thank you very much for being with us, taking us all around the scene, as you do in The Terrorist Hunters. Bless you for being with us.
My pleasure.
And now, first of all, my apologies to those of you who are watching this programme tomorrow, when it's Saturday the 14th. But today, as we do it, it's Friday the 13th. Friday the 13th of November. In many countries, Friday the 13th is regarded as bad luck, inauspicious, a day many people would like to avoid by not going out of the house. But is there such a thing as an unlucky day, really? And how much of a role does luck, fate or fortune, have in our lives? Well, joining me now is the man who studied these principles, the principles of good and bad luck, Professor Richard Wiseman. Richard, welcome.
Thank you.
Of all the various theories, how did this day, Friday the 13th, become deemed as unlucky?
Well, to be honest, we don't really know for certain. We know that Judas was the sort of 13th guest at the Last Supper, so that's where the number 13 as being unlucky comes from. The reason why it should be paired with a Friday, a little bit mysterious. So lots of these superstitions sort of lost in the mist of time, but it does go back a very long way. It's a bit like touching on wood, which is a kind of way of getting the benign wood gods, a pagan idea, on your side. So these things really have a long history.
Right, and in terms, do people change their way of acting or their schedule on Friday the 13th?
They absolutely do. So in some ways, people are right to be a little bit nervous around the date because there's some evidence there's more car accidents on Friday the 13th than perhaps they should be, just by chance. The reason for that seems to be that people become a little bit nervous when they drive, and so therefore more likely to have those accidents.
And so people do that with suspicions on other days too, don't they? I mean, going under ladders and...
all of those things. So some of our research suggests that the sort of negative superstitions, the worry if you break a mirror, walk under a ladder, worry about Friday the 13th, those sorts of things not particularly good for you. They make you feel quite anxious. Some of the other superstitions, like crossing your fingers or carrying a lucky charm, those things tend to promote optimism. So they're actually not so bad for you because they make you feel a bit better about the future.
Yes. Though there was a case of Mr. Ronald Krebs, who was a driver who had his nose broken by a plastic religious good luck statuette hanging from the rearview mirror. So that was bad luck.
That's pretty bad luck, yes. Yeah.
Are people in fact lucky or unlucky? I mean, and do they affect that, in fact, I mean, by being more optimistic or whatever?
Well, that's really the central point in our research. So we followed the lives of about 1,000 exceptionally lucky and unlucky people. And we could see that for the most part, and this was excluding some sort of accidents and illnesses, but for the most part, they're creating that good and bad luck by the way they're thinking and behaving. So lucky people, as you say, very optimistic, they're very resilient. When bad things happen, they bounce back. They're very open to opportunities. Unlucky people are the opposite. So there's a huge sort of psychology of luck.
So are we born lucky or unlucky, or is it heredity or environment, or can we train ourselves to be lucky?
Yes, I mean, it's all those things. I mean, some people are born optimists, they're born pessimists, there is a big genetic component to it. Other times it is to do with upbringing. So in our research, we saw parents passing on their attitudes about good and bad luck to their children without realising it. But the good news is that you can change. So
you can?
Oh, absolutely. In the Luck Factor book, I talk about the various ways that people can train themselves to be lucky by looking on the bright side, by being open to opportunities and so on. So absolutely, we followed a group of people for about 2 years who are attempting to change their luck, and most of them managed to do it.
Well, that's good news. Are you a lucky person?
No, it's been a disaster. No, just kidding. No, I'm a fairly lucky person. I spent most of my career studying things that I find fascinating, which I think is a pretty lucky thing to be doing. Yeah.
Oh, well, that's terrific. Well, thank you very much indeed, Richard, and good luck.
And to you, thank you.
And good luck to you too. That's all from this lucky edition. We'll see you again next week. Join us then for another Frost Over the World.